You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Good afternoon and welcome to the South Bay Economic Forecast, virtual for the first time this year. I'm Frank Motek, your senior money news anchor at KNX 1070 News Radio, and once again it's an honor and privilege to be with you for this important discussion during the ongoing coronavirus crisis and pandemic. Today's discussion is entitled, Adapting to Change, Surviving and Thriving During Disruption, which we've all experienced. Now today you can expect to learn about some of the largest economic changes due to the COVID-19 crisis, what trends have accelerated in this area, and what innovations have emerged from all this. You'll also hear success stories from companies in this area who have quickly determined that they had to change the way they do business. As we've done in the past, we'll be splitting the program into two parts. First, we'll be getting the latest news on our economy here in the South Bay. The Economist assembled will cover such topics as which economic trends have accelerated. How does the COVID-19 recession compare to the previous ones? How quickly will we recover from all this? And who has been the most impacted? We will then transition to our Adapting to Change panel with an exciting lineup of speakers representing a variety of industries, and they will discuss changing business practices to survive COVID-19, new innovative technology concepts that have emerged during this time, and cutting-edge advancements. Following our panel discussion, you will have the chance to speak directly with today's speakers during the virtual reception we'll be having. And for those of you participating in social media, today's hashtag is CSUDHForecast. I would now like to acknowledge the extraordinary sponsors and express our tremendous gratitude to them for helping to support this important event. Many thanks to our two returning gold sponsors, Bree Nguyen and Ivy and Leo Chu. And many thanks to our silver sponsors, which include returning sponsors, Watson Land Company, Systems Technology Incorporated, and a new silver sponsor, author of the book, Fundable Startup, Dr. Fred Haney. Thank you again very much for your support for this important program today. And finally, we'd like to take this chance to thank all of the city and elected officials who are joining us virtually today. Before we dive into the program, I would like to now introduce the host of today's forecast event, the president of California State University, Dominguez Hills, Dr. Thomas Parham. Dr. Parham, it's a tremendous honor and pleasure to invite you now to deliver the official welcome to this forecast event and all of the attendees on behalf of the university. Dr. Thomas Parham.
Thanks, Frank. And good afternoon. And thank you, everyone who's joining us today, whether in our socially distanced LSU ballroom or here on campus or virtually. For those I've not had the privilege of meeting, I'm Dr. Thomas Parham, and I'm honored to be the 11th president of California State University, Dominguez Hills, an extraordinary campus that proudly serves the communities of South Bay and South Central regions of Los Angeles County. Now, I want to start out today by thanking our distinguished speakers and presenters, including our own Dr. Jose Martinez, our co-director of the South Bay Economic Institute, who's also Associate Professor of Economics and Chair of Accounting, Finance, and Economics at this university. Also want to thank Dr. Finwin Prager, the co-director of the South Bay Economics Institute and Assistant Professor of Business Administration at Dominguez Hills. And also joining us today is a third member of our Dominguez Hills faculty, the illustrious Dr. Jennifer Broadman, Associate Professor of Finance. And so I'd like to mention, as I continue, how proud I am of the work done by these three esteemed scholars. And for the first time ever, let me say that again, for the first time ever, they have produced the annual South Bay Economic Forecast completely in-house through our university's South Bay Economics Institute. So I commend them on their hard work, their dedication, right, and commitment to the local business community. Now, like you, I'm looking forward to hearing from a variety of speakers today on the theme of adapting to change and surviving and thriving during disruption, a very important topic during a time of extreme turmoil, such as we are currently experiencing. But much of today's forecast, ladies and gentlemen, will focus on the South Bay's small business community, which is entirely appropriate as they have often borne the brunt of the disruptions that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused to this economy. Now, of course, the pandemic is not the only source of upheaval these days. As cries for social justice and equity arise from streets across the nation in response to the continued violence and brutality perpetrated against people of color. And these events too have impacted local businesses, shining a spotlight on the need for inclusive workplaces and the importance of developing an economy that serves all of our citizens, irrespective of the demographic background they represent. So while we're listening to the array of facts and figures during today's panel and presentation, I'd also like to reflect on the ways such economic development ties into social justice, the driving ethos behind what we do here at the Dominguez Hills campus. You see, Cal State University Dominguez Hills was formed in the wake of the Watts Rebellion back in 1965 and placed in its present location so that it could serve as a gateway and the doorway to the residents of the urban core of South Central Los Angeles, and particularly providing an additional educational resource for the area's underserved citizens. So fighting for social justice and equity is hardwired into the DNA of our campus, and we strive to foreground this concern in all that we do. So by helping sustain and grow small business, a large portion which are minority owned and women owned, we contribute directly to the social justice and equity in the region. Small businesses have traditionally been among the greatest drivers of social mobility among culturally different populations. And by supporting and strengthening them, we support and strengthen our entire community. So the work of the South Bay Economics Institute plays a vital role in local business community, providing invaluable resources, expertise, and foresight during a time when all three are desperately needed. As I close, I'm reminded of a quote from one of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that true peace, my friends, is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. So while we will never attain a situation in which we are all agree on every issue that is before us, we can still strive together in the same direction, working towards common goals, even if we differ on the ways and means of attaining them. We must dedicate ourselves to this hard work with a belief that justice can be attained, not only in the streets and the courtrooms, but in the workplaces we share and the businesses we support. California State University, Dominguez Hills is proud to play an important role in the South Bay economy and beyond, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you to truly make the difference in the lives of our students, our community, and this nation. So I thank you for being here. And Frank, I'll turn it back over to you now.
Thank you very much, President Parham. It's wonderful to see you again, and Godspeed in your important work here. We will now begin with the formal program. And right off the bat here, as Dr. Parham noted, this is the first year the forecast has been created right here on campus, in-house at Cal State Dominguez Hills. And we are very excited to learn about what's happening right here in the South Bay from those who have prepared this report. Please welcome our economist panel now, Dr. Jennifer Brodman, Dr. Jose Martinez, and Dr. Finwin Prager. As we begin, why don't each of you share with us your area of research and special interest, and then we'll start the South Bay economics discussion and focus on the South Bay economy. Dr. Brodman, let's begin with you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jennifer Brodman. My research area is corporate finance and entrepreneurial finance, and I focus on corporate governance and access to capital. And I'm actually working on a study examining access to capital for minority and women entrepreneurs, which is being supported by the Daimler Institute, South Bay Economic Institute, and the CCDH College of Business Administration and Public Policy.
Dr. Martinez.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Jose Martinez, and I'm an associate professor of economics at the Department of Accounting, Finance, Economics, and Law at the College of Business. I'm also the co-director of the South Bay Economics Institute, and my research is tied to the institute. And Dr. Prager can here, the other co-director, can tell you a little bit more about the research. But our research is tied to the area that we serve, the South Bay.
Dr. Prager.
Hi there, my name is Finn Prager, and I'm Associate Professor of Public Administration here on campus, also the co-director of the South Bay Economics Institute. We've done a number of different studies in recent years looking at phenomenon in the South Bay. So that includes freight competitiveness, that includes telework and other working from home practices. My other area of research is in disasters and the economics and policy of disasters. Little did I know that we'd be living through the most severe disaster of our generation while we're here on campus, but it's certainly fascinating times.
And certainly now with the benefit of, I guess you could say, 2020 hindsight, with the third quarter of the year just wrapping up and the fourth quarter of the year just beginning, tell us about the enormous changes you've seen in the economy and all this, the disruptions, the closures, and the innovations that we've seen as this pandemic has played out.
So obviously on a macro scale, we've seen significant impacts to GDP, the likes of which in a single quarter we've not seen even since the Great Depression. A 32% drop in GDP is substantial and has impacted the entire economy regardless of which state we're in. Things have bounced back a little bit, which is good news, but the recovery looks like it will take at least a year to play out. In terms of employment, I think Jose has got some good findings on that.
Yeah, the employment in the South Bay and the LA region has suffered, of course, everybody's seen that, but it has been worse than the previous recession in 2008, 2009. So that is a big impact for the area. Of course, different sectors of the economy are recovering at different pace, but we expect that most sectors might recover next year.
Dr. Brodman, would you like to weigh in here?
We have seen that certain sectors have been more affected than others. Definitely sectors that are faced providing more essential goods, such as grocery stores or deliveries. Anything that's regarding cloud-based technologies, they've had huge boost to their performance. But we've seen drastic hits in hospitality and any types of event spaces. We've seen hair salons, nail salons closures, and especially anything where there's more. Anything that's going to be having activity that's going to be indoors has been having to kind of shift to more outdoor spaces. So we've seen like restaurants having to have more outdoor spaces to be able to bring in revenue, and also some of the shifts being to more delivery and pickups, both in the retail sector and in the hospitality sector.
And we've seen certain parts of the economy get especially hit hard during this ongoing crisis: the services sector, the hospitality sector, restaurants, travel, tourism in Los Angeles County affected, which of course South Bay is impacted by all this. Dr. Brodman, how do you encourage businesses to keep going in this still very difficult environment?
There has been delays in openings, as we've seen what's been happening with, say, the impacts in Disneyland going on in Anaheim, and those impacts in the surrounding hospitality sectors that are being impacted by that economy. I mean, we're seeing a lot of shifts to more outdoor spaces. Hair and nail salons are going to be set to open. Another sector that's been hit very badly is gyms, because everything is done more indoors. So a lot of shifts have been kind of put more into a virtual space, which we've seen a lot in the healthcare sector with like telemedicine and telehealth.
One of the bright spots in all this, of course, has been e-commerce, as people go online and buy everything, pretty much everything these days. Tell us about this now, the bigger and bigger impact. This trend has accelerated in a very big way this year. And tell us what kind of impact you've seen in the world of e-commerce here in the South Bay.
There's a lot of shift has been done to more deliveries and more pickups, which we've seen a lot of stores doing closures and having more pickups and deliveries instead. And actually, if you've seen more on a national scale too, Shopify is up like 3.55% right now today, because there's just a lot more of an online presence with small businesses, and so that shift more into e-commerce.
And I think this reflects a broader shift, right, where as we've kind of hunkered down in our homes, the economy has followed that same shift. Mm-hmm. So we can see in consumer spending where There's a clear advantage if you're in the grocery sector, if you're in the e-commerce sector, if you're providing home improvements, for example. Those sectors have been either growing slightly or much less impacted than, obviously was mentioned earlier, hospitality, travel, these kind of things. So our worlds have definitely become smaller, and the economy is reflecting that.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about recovery, you have to be more specific about what sectors are you talking about. Like I said before, some areas, some sectors have already recovered. So for them, this is a higher level than even before the pandemic. But for other sectors, it's going to take a long time until we have a proven treatment for COVID-19.
Taking a ground level look at things, indoor malls remain closed, the campus is closed, right? So we've seen the retail landscape change, the restaurants have changed, obviously with only outdoor dining at this time. What are your thoughts about things as you look around and drive through the area?
I mean, we're definitely seeing cities trying to help support the businesses that are in their area, having opportunities of doing parklets. You've seen street closures where they actually close down the street in like high traffic areas so that they can actually expand the walkways so that people can enact social distancing. So there's definitely been some adaptations to kind of help shift for the demands of being able to, keep a healthier and safer space when people are going and engaging with businesses.
But the biggest shifts really have been that people are now eating in a lot more. So they're getting deliveries from either established restaurants or this new phenomenon of ghost kitchens where spaces have emerged for new and creative ways of producing food. And in fact, in our second panel, we'll have Every Table, who are an example of that, of providing a new and innovative way to bring food to the communities that we live in.
Yeah, so innovation is the key. I think this, as hard of a challenge the current situation is, I think it presents also an opportunity for some companies to bring out new ideas, innovate, and that's the companies that we're going to see in the future.
Indoor malls remain closed, right? We see the outdoor facilities open now, but what is the outlook for retail in the South Bay at this point, given the ongoing challenges? Maybe Finland Prager on that one? Dr. Prager?
Retail is obviously going to face a lot of challenges. That said, there's been an ongoing shift towards e-commerce for the last decade. So I think many of these companies would have been well aware of those challenges and would have been working to address them already. So I think one interesting element of this pandemic more broadly is that the economy has kind of shifted ahead 5 years in a number of key ways, whether that's in terms of e-commerce, whether that's in terms of some of these innovations that we're seeing even today, right? This event is an example of where we're innovating. We're bringing a new mode of production to this event space. Another major shift has been in telework. We had done a prior study prior to the pandemic about the breadth of telework across the US, but even in the South Bay. And it was interesting that telework had been growing steadily over time as technological improvements had come in and more companies were being alerted to the benefits of telework. Since the pandemic, we've seen a shift from 5 to 15%, according to the statistics, way up to 45 to 55%. And we've all lived through that. We've all experienced the ups and downs, the highs and lows of working from school and away from home and having school from home as well. As parents, we're seeing some of the challenges that our school children are facing. And that's reflective of these broader shifts. People are making decisions maybe that would have been made 5 years ahead of time. So it's been a fascinating acceleration of some of these trends that were already taking place.
Yeah, sorry. When we did the study, the previous study mentioned by Dr. Prager, it was mentioned that some companies were willing to try telework and flexible workplace practices, but they were not just ready to do that. So this pandemic was creating an opportunity for them to push them to innovate and to deal with the issue. And it seems like a lot of companies are doing just fine. A lot of their workforce is working from home, and productivity hasn't suffered that much.
But I think there's been two important, maybe unintended consequences of this. So firstly, we're seeing a massive impact on the real estate on commercial real estate, sorry. So a number of companies are reporting that they're either in the process of making decisions about ending their leases or have already ended their leases. And so that's likely to have a significant impact on that commercial real estate sector. You know, it would be a challenging time for that particular sector. They're going to have to work hard to innovate themselves, and maybe there's room for cities to change zoning laws, right? That if we've got a high demand for housing, but maybe a lower demand for office space, then maybe there's room for maneuver there. I think the other side effect is that, and we were seeing this trend already, that those who were able to work from home tended to be upper management or middle management. It was far less common to have people working from home in the kind of operator or street level positions. And we've seen a really significant impact in terms of the equity of these outcomes for the job market, where you're much more likely to have lost your job during the pandemic if you're in one of these lower level positions. And that correlates sadly with inequalities in the labor force, whether that's education levels or demographic inequalities.
So speaking of the real estate industry, we want to get into that in a big way here. But first, according to a recent Yelp survey that I had a chance to take a look at, it says Los Angeles is leading the nation in the number of business closings. I believe the number was 15,000. That's the last number they put out. Any predictions here in the South Bay as to what percentage of restaurants might not make it through this? Retail stores, mom and pop, small business stores that are especially being hit hard by this ongoing crisis. Are there any numbers that you're able to put out here today?
I don't think we have specific numbers on that, but we can tell you that the impact is broad. It's not just that sector, but we are confident that LA area is very diverse, and the South Bay a little bit more so. So we're confident that even though we're dealing with this pandemic and it's hurting a lot of sectors, overall, we're going to do fine, and we're going to find a way to innovate and move on through this pandemic. So I don't have the specific numbers on that, but I can tell you that at the same time that some places are closing, other places are opening. And those are the signs that you want to see, the innovation side.
Dr. Broadman, any thoughts about that?
I would just agree with Dr. Martinez. I mean, what we are seeing is shifts in investment as well. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing is a shift in demand. So there's a lot more demand in the health tech sector, ed tech sector as well, with everything going to online education. So there are different sectors that are being impacted, but then there's also still investment going on in different sectors.
All right, let's talk about real estate now, commercial as well as residential. The commercial real estate sector especially being hit recently because of the office situation and concern about returning to the office workplace and the timetable for all this. On the flip side, we've seen residential real estate doing quite well these days, with sales activity picking up and home prices pretty much at all-time highs right now. Dr. Martinez, I know from our previous discussions here at this forum, you track real estate very, very closely in this area. Please give us your view now of what's happening with residential as well as commercial real estate here in the South Bay.
Yeah, you're right. I think residential sector is one of the bright spots in the economy right now. It's doing relatively really well. But I want you to consider for a moment to think about before the pandemic, the sector was still dealing with issues of affordability and tight housing supply. Of course, the interest rates were low, so people were taking advantage of that. Unemployment was low. And even though it was a small percentage, but there was some wage growth. So those was a good environment for the housing market as a whole. Now, after the pandemic, you still have issues of affordability. You still have issues of the tight housing supply. And interest rates are actually even lower than before, so that's a plus. I think that's what's holding this sector. But you have to consider that unemployment, of course, is up, and wage growth is not there. But on top of that, you have changing preferences. People are rethinking their way of living. Some people are realizing now that they spend more time at home that they might need a bigger house. And some people that are renting, of course, those can afford it, they're thinking about moving into a home. So it's definitely a renter's market, and also for the housing sector, I think it's going to continue to do well in the near future.
On home prices now, with the price levels of where they are and the unemployment levels as high as they are, won't that impact the real estate market at some point?
Yes, but again, the interest rates are so low that people are taking advantage of that. In the South Bay Economics Institute, we tend to analyze housing data, thinking about different areas in the South Bay, the coastal communities and the inland communities. And both of them are going to do well relatively to other areas in terms of sales and home prices. But we expect the inland communities in the South Bay to do a little bit better, especially in terms of price increases. So it's going to keep holding on, and it's going to be a sector that is going to bring in economic growth to the whole area.
Dr. Prager, any thoughts about the real estate here and what's the outlook for residential and commercial, please?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting picture right now. The increases in residential home prices, as Dr. Martinez highlighted, is driven in part by preferences, also by the really low interest rate. So if you can refinance right now, there's amazing deals to be had for sure. On the other hand, the rental market has been hit, and so it's led some to hypothesize that maybe folks are moving out of these higher price rental areas such as LA in search of either they're moving into the homeowners market or they're moving into a different location because they can now work from home anywhere they like, anywhere in the world even, and they can take advantage of that flexibility. What's interesting, however, is we're seeing the rental market being most impacted at that very top level, at the kind of luxury end of the market. And that's usually how the trend works, that you see those higher prices, higher priced units having, individuals substitute away from the higher prices into either a lower quality home or another area entirely. And I have noticed personally, and maybe this is just anecdotally, that a lot of the new builds that we've seen, the increase in supply in especially the rental market, has come in those luxury high places, packing many homes into desirable locations, whether that's the west side of LA or downtown LA or downtown Long Beach, those kind of really dense areas. And of course, those are the places that we don't want to live right now. We don't want to be packed in, we don't want to be tight. There's not the restaurants, there's not the amenities that we would usually have. However, in the long run, I don't think any of us have any concerns about the desirability of not just cities, but our region here. We've still got the great weather. We're going to have, we've still got the great beaches. We're going to have the restaurants come back. We've got some of the best food in the world in this region, and that's not going away. So a bright future is ahead, but in the short term, it's going to be a bumpy ride for sure.
And of course, affordability, the number one issue here in local real estate. What do you see as far as home affordability is concerned and rents are concerned? It looks like rents are starting to ease somewhat now because so many people are out of work. And what do you see as far as rents are concerned and affordability overall? Any new construction or anything else that might help on the affordability side here in the South Bay? Dr. Martinez.
Yes, as prices go down for rentals, the affordability is supposed to increase. So that's a good sign. And I think if you are one of those people looking for a place to rent, this is definitely your market. So you're going to be able to find a very good space at a really reasonable price. And as Dr. Prager mentioned, this decrease in prices has been more substantial in the higher end market. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because given the restrictions that we have right now, a lot of those places, they offer gyms and things like that, and people are not able to use them. So you'll see that those prices to go down, especially in the high-end market.
Dr. Broadman, any thoughts on affordability? Do you see any relief for the people who are struggling at this point?
There has been cities that have had means of delaying any types of eviction as well to protect renters, and then even renters that are working and they're looking at maybe that are in a lease or their lease is about to be up because of the fact that there's this more supply of higher end rentals. So anybody that's an existing tenant can always renegotiate their lease as well with favorable terms, especially in any of the luxury housing, such as in like downtown Los Angeles or Long Beach.
Certainly, we've never seen anything like this in 2020 compared to the Great Recession, the last big economic downturn. Let's take a closer look at this. The current recession, many say, is already over, given its intensity and the recovery we've seen. Dr. Prager, maybe you can go first on this one. Give us some historical context here, considering the depth and breadth of this recession and the ongoing struggles and what things might look like moving forward in this recovery.
Sure. So as we looked at in the report, the depth of this recession is particularly pronounced. And that's entirely surprising given that we effectively shut down a major proportion of our economy. And for good reason. You know, the idea that is often neglected here is that we were saving lives. And we've really done I'd say, a fairly good job in California when you look compared to other states, especially on the East Coast, or other countries in Europe. You know, our death rates are nowhere near that level, and that's because, whether through luck or judgment, we got on top of the shutdown early. An interesting contrast, though, with other areas, especially Europe, is that we did not shut down our economy to the same extent. So you mentioned earlier construction. That stayed open the whole time, and we saw the continued construction and increased supply of housing, which is going to continue to be a long-term issue for our region. So when we were looking through the different sectors that were closed down, there was actually a lot of good sense included in that policy making. How things play out moving forward, it's much less clear. There's definitely rosy spots. You know, economists now compared to economists in June, the same economists have been surveyed, are seeing a rosier picture, but it's definitely not rosy. So still the major macroeconomic forecasters, including UCL Anderson, who we worked with in the past, and the major banks and the CBO, these major forecasters, they are fairly in agreement. There's a fairly good amount of consensus that we're going to see some level of return in 2021, but then unemployment is going to lag behind that. So we're going to see unemployment return to prior levels maybe in 2022. And so these kind of shifts are entirely uncertain. We accept here that we didn't predict this. This is a once in a generation event. Not quite black swan, people were talking about it, but it's definitely an unusual and unusually bad recession. However, hopefully we're going to see our region bounce back, not least because we have relatively flexible labor markets. We have a really highly educated, in terms of human capital, we've got an excellent workforce here in the region. So all these things, including our location and the ability to tap into incredible trade links throughout the Asian Pacific region, we're going to recover. The question is how quickly, and I think we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, and on that point, it is true, usually unemployment or employment takes longer to recover than GDP. But to keep it in perspective, the current situation, according to the forecast, it seems like for the whole year, we're going to be down about 4.2% in GDP. Compared to 2008, 2009, that was about 2.8%. So even with the increases in GDP in this quarter, the third quarter, and the last quarter of the year, you still kind of see a big impact, and employment is going to take longer to recover. I want to point out also that typically recessions tend to impact the most vulnerable. Unfortunately, this recession is no different, and it might be even worse. Not just because of the issues of uncertainty about income or employment, but the health issues, the health insecurities, and also families dealing with kids of school age having to deal with the digital divide, for example. So this recession might be particularly hard for those sections.
Let me ask Dr. Brodman then, from a social standpoint, do you see a faster recovery than what we've seen in past recessions?
I mean, before with the 2008 financial crisis, we saw that it took about an 18-month recovery. So, I mean, it really just, with this, there's more uncertainty because we just don't know when that vaccine is going to be released. And that's going to have an impact on when the economy is going to fully open up. Even when it fully opens up, it's going to be a different economy than we had before, just even in terms of the workplace and what the demands will be of that economy. But yeah, I mean, that's one reason why there's a lot of element uncertainty is because of whenever that vaccine is going to be released and when it's going to be available.
Yeah, on that point, I want to mention that, like I said, in the South Bay Economics Institute, we tend to focus on the South Bay area. And it seems like because of the exposure to different sectors, the South Bay might be doing a little bit better in terms of recovery than LA, just because LA has more exposure to accommodation, leisure, and hospitality and such. But going back to the point of with the economy to recover if we open up. Let's say that the governor or the president says that we're going to open up completely. We're still not going to go to 100% recovery. If we take a look at what happened in Sweden, people can say that they didn't go through a lockdown phase, and still the economy was not functioning 100%. It was about 90%. So until there's a tested and proven treatment for COVID-19, you should expect the economy to function about 95% at best.
And just to build on that, there's a really interesting study done at Harvard with Chetty and his colleagues. And the most interesting element of that was that the neighborhoods with more wealthy people in, businesses in those neighborhoods tended to be more impacted by this recession than those with less wealthy inhabitants. And part of the reason is because if you can afford to, you hunkered down. You removed yourself from those usual spending patterns, the sweet luxuries in life, going out to restaurants, going to the opera, going to movies. As has been discussed, that was all taken away. And that impacts not just those communities, but also the people who are working in those businesses. And one of the amazing things about our economy in Los Angeles is that people live and work everywhere. People are living in the east side and driving to the west side, or living in Orange County and driving all the way up to downtown. And that interconnection means that actually, to back up Jose's point, even though wealthier communities may have been proportionally more impacted and the business in them, it's workers from poorer communities who are working in those businesses too. And so those ripple effects can spread all over and in different ways. So it's, the picture isn't good in terms of equity, but hopefully that picture will be flipped next year as we start to grow, and some of the real benefits that we saw to low-paid jobs in the last few years that were really showing impressive gains, hopefully those will return once the vaccine has been found, once a good treatment's been found, and we can start to develop our economy once more.
Well, had the COVID crisis not occurred, we'd probably be talking about trade today with China and, of course, the new deal with Mexico and Canada in the mix as well. What about the U.S. and China locking horns again over technology recently and trade, despite the Phase 1 deal that was put together this past year? What do you think about the impact on the South Bay economy on these important trade developments?
So as economists, we worry about any kind of restrictions on trade, any taxes or tariffs. It's interesting that these things have been brought back into the political debate, because for years there was consensus amongst all parties that we should keep tariffs low. Why? Because it brings in affordable products from other countries, but also spurs economic activity in our own companies. The Los Angeles region is particularly dependent on trade. We've got our two major ports, as many of us know about, which I think collectively are the largest in the US. We've actually been doing a study looking at how we can even make California's freight system more competitive still. And one thing that's coming up in that report again and again, in that research, again and again, is the number of bottlenecks that we can see. So whether that's on the US-Mexican border, where wait times are far higher for border crossings than they are on the Canadian border. Why is that? We need to invest more in these border crossings. We need to have more fluidity across those borders to bring extra economic advantage. The same at the seaports. You know, these things can be invested in and they will bring significant returns. And I hope that any future government and administration is going to look seriously at investing in our trade system on that infrastructural level.
What was interesting about this current administration and situation is that typically countries impose restrictions on trade when the economy is not doing well. And what's interesting here in the US is actually the restriction came into place when the economy was doing really well. So now, of course, the economy is suffering, so you might make the case to make more restrictions. But of course, at the end of the day, those restrictions do not help the economy. So hopefully they'll come down a little bit because it doesn't help at all, especially a region that depends a lot on the ports of San Pedro.
Any thoughts specifically on the Canada-Mexico deal as well as the Phase 1 China deal and its impact on the South Bay economy? Have they helped or hurt the South Bay economy?
The good news is that trade has continued despite the pandemic. And so any drops that we're seeing are likely due to declines in consumer confidence and consumer spending, as opposed to anything fundamental or problematic in the trade networks and the trade system itself. And so as long as those trade networks are still healthy, we've got good infrastructure, you know, impressive roads, good railroads, those kinds of things, quick border crossings. As long as those things are healthy and we're not imposing tariffs, which do bear a cost to consumers and to the companies that are involved, then once consumer demand comes back, then we'll see an improved trade situation once more.
Dr. Brodman, what are your views on the impact of the tariffs?
The impact of tariffs, I mean, definitely right now on the consumer side, I mean, prices need to be accessible. I mean, there's our consumers right now are dealing with unpredictable incomes. A lot of people are out of work. So any kind of rising in tariffs is going to deal with the accessibility to goods and services for a lot of people.
Yeah, as it might come to a surprise to some people, who ends up paying for those tariffs is consumers in the U.S., even though politicians might tell you otherwise. So that's the nature of it. So hopefully those restrictions will start to go down to help the economy.
Turning now to the area of the ports, and another tremendous achievement really during this pandemic, and that is the opening of the brand new Gerald Desmond Bridge, certainly impacting the local economy and the traffic in the area. Any thoughts about that one?
We would support any investment that helps trade flows at any area. So again, in our research, we found a number of bottlenecks, whether that's on border crossings, whether that's at the ports, whether that's in what's called intermodal transportation. So those connections between the different modes of transportation, you know, for example, between rail and road, between sea and road. These roadblocks, if you will, have a major impact on our trade system, and they cost our companies dollars. They cost our consumers time and expense. Similarly, the traffic congestion in the region, one of the upsides of the pandemic is that, you know, it takes us half the time to drive anywhere in Los Angeles at the moment. And that has actually been a real boon for freight shippers and others with logistics who've got a real interest in seeing congestion patterns change. Hopefully some of that will continue following the pandemic. So with many people now working from home, we're hoping to see freeways that enable us to really reduce the costs for our trade sectors and our companies around the US.
So overall, I think that this bridge, of course, is going to help to reduce some of those bottlenecks. So definitely it's going to be good for the competitiveness of the area. But I want to point out that in this particular project that we're working on together, we found that some of the ports in other states, actually, they're receiving more funding from the state. So, of course, the local officials from the ports in San Pedro will argue that they need to get more money to invest in their infrastructure. But we found that other states actually receive more money than our ports in the state.
Remember, it talking about the construction of the SoFi Stadium. It's done now. We didn't get a chance to see Taylor Swift pump up the economy as we planned. There's no concert to open up the new stadium this year, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. But we are seeing games being played there for the first time just recently. What about the economic impact of the stadium now that it's up and running? Unfortunately, without the spectators that we're expecting there for the moment.
Yeah, that's the 95% economy, right? It cannot go to 100% because we are not allowing people to go into the stadiums. So as long as we don't have a tested treatment, I think we're going to continue with a functioning economy that is has a lot of jobs, new jobs, but is not functioning at 100% recovery.
But on the other hand, there's good news stories coming over from Europe where, especially in the world of soccer or football, as I call it, we're now seeing many countries are trialing and steadily growing the number of supporters in stadiums. And it's largely proven to be safe and virus spreading free, which is good news. Not just for those individual companies and businesses, which is clearly a benefit for them, but also for that sense of community that you get around those events. And of course, those businesses in the local area. So all studies of major investments in sports stadiums show that if you can get the winning ticket of not just building a stadium, but also building an area around that stadium, having fans come and visit, but then go to local restaurants, stay at local hotels, that's where the real economic benefits occur. And so, as Frank pointed out, clearly that's going to be very challenging as we move out of the pandemic. But the more that we can do that, the bigger the multiplier effect, as it's called, from an investment like that will be.
Yep. And this goes back to the importance of the consumer. Consumers represent 2/3 of the economy. So as long as they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to spend as they were before. So the key is that they feel comfortable and they start going out and they feel like they're contributing to the economy and they're not exposing themselves or their family to the virus.
Now, so we have a presidential election, obviously, that could potentially impact things here, and also the propositions facing on the ballot, which is certainly going to be impacting people here with various propositions, including Prop 22. That's the one about primarily about app-based transportation and delivery companies providing employee benefits after AB 5 was passed. And then we also have Prop 15 on the property tax issue for commercial real estate. Dr. Martinez, any thoughts about all of those things here?
Yeah, in particular for the, some of the propositions they claim to have a big impact on the local economy. For the gig economy, as they call it, or the app-based economy, I think it's just a war between people trying to get benefits and trying to have a fair wage. So it's always the struggle to convince your employer that you deserve that wage. So it's no surprise that the people supporting that proposition are those companies, and the people against them is basically people that are struggling and they want to have a good paying job that pays benefit like everybody else.
We are now going to transition to the Adapting to Change panel, and we want to welcome Sam Polk now from Everytable. Before I introduce the rest of the panel, let's take a closer look at Everytable and learn about what they do.
We've gone from 30,000 meals a week before this pandemic to this week 150,000 meals a week, while fully pivoting our entire business to this whole new thing.
Video of hundreds of cards lining up for the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank before it opened yesterday.
One of the consequences of all the closures, cancellations, and layoffs is that some people might not have enough food to eat.
3 years ago, Everytable started as a restaurant chain aimed at redefining fast food. They wanted to take on the behemoths of the industry. But instead of burgers and fries, Everytable wanted to serve healthy meals for about $5 a piece and make them available in underserved communities. Their healthy food mission forced them to rethink what a restaurant even is. And in the process, they unknowingly set themselves up to survive in the midst of a pandemic.
It's almost like we took sort of the hardest problem in food. How do you make fresh, healthy food and sell it for less than the price of fast food? And now we've gotten there.
So how'd they do it?
This is like tricolor quinoa.
This is Sam Polk.
Trying to figure out why we have so much of it.
He was a hedge fund trader on Wall Street until he left his job, moved to Los Angeles, and started Everytable.
$1 million for 10% of the company. We'll do it.
From the beginning, Sam was committed to making healthy meals available in food deserts like Watts and Compton.
In Los Angeles County, there's over 1 million Angelenos who experience food insecurity every day. We have twice as many people living in South LA as compared to West LA, but we have half as many grocery stores. And that has a huge impact on life expectancy. For example, the child that grows up in Watts is going to live 12 years less than the child that grows up in Brentwood.
These days, healthy food is a luxury product that is enjoyed by the most affluent. We believe that healthy food is a human right.
To sell healthy food at $5 a meal, Everytable had to rethink everything, starting with their kitchen model. Instead of each store making its own food, all the meals are made in one central kitchen, then distributed across the city. This cuts the cost of opening each new store by 75%. Sam knew diverse lines of business would serve the company in the long term. So they launched vending machines which are very low cost to operate and allow them to reach new markets like hospitals, apartment complexes, or colleges. And they launched a subscription service where they deliver meals to customers at regular intervals.
For us, we've got to make it by a certain time, put it on a delivery truck, have it go out, get there at the right time. When it works, beautiful symphony, and when it doesn't work, this disastrous cluster, basically.
But one of Everytable's most radical business moves is pricing meals differently based on the neighborhood they're sold in. A meal that costs $9 at the Everytable in Brentwood, for example, costs $5 at the one in Compton. This kind of pricing creates equity in the availability of healthy food, and it's also a price that makes scaling possible. And for Sam Polk and Everytable, the goal is to eventually have 37,000 stores, just as many as McDonald's. Because at that size, you can really make a difference in the food system. As an example, you know those apple pies from McDonald's?
The warmth of our new oven-baked apple pie.
The apples inside help make McDonald's the largest buyer of apples in the world. It has affected the types of apples that farmers choose to plant, and as a result, what kinds are available in most grocery stores. McDonald's is also the largest buyer of beef, pork, tomatoes, lettuce, and potatoes in the world. So what happens if Everytable gets to 37,000 stores? What is the impact on the entire food system if healthy food becomes the norm for most people's diets? And what about the impact on communities?
I grew up in what they call Uptown Watts. We didn't have stores that had healthy fruits and vegetables. Everytable don't pay us to promote their brand. But when you look right down the street, we're pushing the brand of Everytable because we believe in what Everytable will stand for.
So far, Everytable has been embraced by communities in ways that most fast food brands could only dream of. And now, they're needed more than ever.
From the coronavirus pandemic, many businesses are closed or only offering food to go, and layoffs are widespread.
As the coronavirus pandemic set in, Everytable, like every other restaurant, wondered what its fate would be. But as it would turn out, they've been the only restaurant set up to meet the demands of people that need them most, like seniors and the homeless. So they've partnered with the city of Los Angeles to ensure these vulnerable groups stay fed throughout the pandemic.
There is only one company in this city that is set up to do this, by which I mean like has the food production capabilities and has the logistical capabilities together and has the willingness to sort of go out and match the city at this speed and at this scale. And it's us. So we sort of decided to step up and do it.
Everytable will make more meals in the first 3 months of LA's shelter-in-place order than they did in their first 3 years of business. They're hiring 10 new people a day, Their staff is working around the clock to meet demand, and they've added a new kitchen that's 4 times the size of the original. What the pandemic has proven is that by staying mission-focused and reinventing the fast food business model, they're set up to take on any challenge.
There's people hungry, and there's a city that sort of is in need of sort of our services, and that's what we're going to do.
Before we move on to the rest of the panel, give us an update on where things stand right now at every table.
Yeah, so every table is running at 180,000 meals a week, which is about 6 times what we were running before the pandemic. We are providing weekly meals to over 14,000 low-income seniors that are trapped in their homes. We are the #1 provider of food service for what's called Project Room Key, which is the LA City has now basically leased about 40 hotels and filled them with people off the streets to make sure that they're safe during the pandemic. And every table is now providing them and the staff 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We've been providing tens of thousands of meals to food insecure college students and to transitional age foster youth who are aging out of the system. And we're right on the verge actually of closing a $16 million Series B round of investment. So things are good for us, but the truth is that the need in the city continues to be very, very dire. And so we are working around the clock to make sure that every Angelino has healthy food and doesn't go hungry during this time.
Certainly. Let me introduce the rest of the panel now. Dana Finding from Root. Dana, thank you. Tell us about Root and share with us your role with Root here, first of all.
Yeah, thanks. So I am the head of product for our merchant experience at Route. Route is a company focused on delivering protection, tracking, and customer engagement for e-commerce customers and users. And I spent the last 8 years in the LA area working in the world of augmented reality and digital transformation as well. So this has been a really interesting time to be looking at these different industries, and happy to be here today.
All right, and you pronounce it Route?
Route, not Root, yes, but my English family would say otherwise.
All right, terrific. Well, welcome and thank you very much. Also with us, a giant on the small business scene for many years, Victor Parker is with us from the U.S. Small Business Administration, and congratulations on your recent promotion at the SBA. Hear from Victor. Let's see some of the great ways the SBA has been helping businesses in this video now.
An idea, a concept, a plan, a dream. That's how businesses start. With the help of the U.S. Small Business Administration, businesses transform from a home office to a global operation, a double oven setup to a 6-person bakery, concept to manufacturing, and from contemplating closure to not just surviving, but thriving. That's the power of the SBA. We make small business our business by being an ally, an advocate, a mentor, a coach, an educator, a friend to ambitious and passionate entrepreneurs. And we're igniting change, sparking action, so businesses across the nation can confidently start, grow, expand, and recover. SBA, empowering small businesses, empowering the American dream.
Victor Parker, thank you very much for being here with us today. And of course, you've played a very, very important role in the survival of many businesses in the South Bay as well as throughout Southern California. First of all, give us an update about the SBA's role in providing lifelines to small businesses here in the ongoing pandemic.
Absolutely, Frank. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. SBA, all hands have been on deck for the course of the last several months to make sure that we're providing programs and services to help benefit our small businesses. And what we've found is so many businesses that have historically not necessarily worked with SBA have now reached out to us as a resource, not only for the financial programs that we've been providing, such as the PPP program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, but also our technical assistance resources. So many businesses have needed some guidance in terms of how they are going to navigate that pivot that's so common now in so many of our businesses. And so our resource partners, such as the Small Business Development Centers, women's business centers, as well as our veterans business centers, have really been at the forefront of providing those services to our small businesses.
Well, I see a critical moment here with lawmakers in Washington still discussing a possibility of another round of stimulus. Any updates there? I've been watching for any further updates here at the station also right now. But are you able to give us any news about that and what resources are available at this point as we await some more news from Washington?
Right. So we are anxiously looking forward to what the new economic package looks like. There are a lot of different things that are on the table, so there's a lot of moving parts. But the good news is that, for example, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is still available now. And so businesses that are still looking to get some additional assistance as they are trying to move in from response mode to recovery mode with the pandemic, they are able to access those funds now. And they can continue to do that as they've always done it. And we look forward to seeing what it will look like in terms of, it may not be called Paycheck Protection Program, but what that new stimulus package will include and how we'll be able to integrate that not only for directly with our small businesses, but how we can better partner with the private sector and with our local government as well as we execute and initiate those new programs as they come forward, hopefully in the very near future.
Bill, with you when these programs first started at the start of this crisis, and the Economic Injury Program, that's the EIDL program, right? Tell us how it works and what do people need to know about that?
Absolutely. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is a loan program that you can apply for directly through the SBA. And so you can go onto our portal at the SBA.gov and you can provide some information to us on that application. It's very much streamlined and we approve it directly, unlike many of our other loan programs. This will enable you to receive funds that you can use not only for payroll, but any of your other working capital needs and things that you need to continue your business, whether it's paying your rent, utilities, any of those regular expenses that you have on a regular basis. You can use that Economic Injury Disaster Loan as a lifeline to continue your business operations and help you through that recovery process.
Few people expected this to drag on as long as it has. Maybe some people did already apply early on in this crisis and need additional funds. Are you able to go back and ask for additional money through the EIDL program?
Yes, you can. There is an email address that you can have that's on your letter when you receive your original loan to ask for reconsideration. And so, as you have indicated, circumstances that's changed based on local government restrictions and as the virus evolves over time. So you may find the need that you can reapply or ask for reconsideration for additional funds beyond the original funds that you received.
All right. Data findings, let me bring you in now. How are you holding up in this crisis? And tell us what you're doing as far as the innovation and technology and concepts that you've seen emerge during this crisis in dealing with what's the current demands out there.
Yeah, I think, there's a meme that's been going around on LinkedIn that I think sums it up very well. And it's a multiple choice question. And it says, who is responsible for driving your company's digital transformation? A, CEO, B, CIO, C, COVID-19. And I think there's, it's dark humor, but there's a lot of truth there in the sense that there's nothing like an incentive to change and adapt like necessity. And as they mentioned on the previous panel on the, trends we've been seeing, there's a lot of innovation that's been happening in the last few decades, and a lot of it happening here in the South Bay. So really what we're seeing now is people leaning into that, people realizing that it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So whether that means leaning on moving their business from brick and mortar to online as well, or something more profound like bringing in robotics and artificial intelligence to help take the place of where it's not safe for humans to be at the moment or is presenting too much risk. I think there's a lot of really interesting need to jump on some of those innovative technologies that we've been working on for so long, and whether it's manufacturing the product or selling the product, anywhere in that whole pipeline, there's a lot of things that we can be doing differently, and we're starting to realize that it's something we have to do.
What's next? We're going to have robots on stage next year. What are
You bet. Yeah, I think, you know, for the last decade, I've heard a lot of fear in the idea of transforming one's business and the idea of automation, the idea of robots coming to take over our jobs. And yeah, sadly, there's an element that some components of human labor can and of course inevitably will be replaced with automation and have been. But with a lot of the companies I've worked with over the years, it's not a matter of trying to displace the individual. It's a matter of trying to reskill the individual. It's a matter of trying to have us all, you know, rise to the occasion and figure out what more we can do and be in that sense of what we do for work. So all that is to say, you know, what's next? I think it's ideally, again, utilizing all of this wonderful technology that we've been working on for so long. Only now we see how actually it can maybe help keep us safe, help keep the economy afloat, help keep you know, businesses operating in a way that otherwise we might have, you know, overlooked. So I'd say, you know, it's doubling down and actually really more about adoption. It's about increasing that adoption and ideally, you know, accelerating it.
Tell us when this started. How did you have to pivot, or were you well positioned to meet these new challenges?
Well, I'd say that, you know, my role at Route is actually relatively new. And so for me personally, I did something really interesting, which was interview and join a new company all while being remote. So if we think about what we're all doing, both on a personal and professional level, we're all, again, meeting the moment and figuring out how technology and different mechanisms for you know, communicating and existing are allowing us to still thrive. So I think that for me personally, that was a really interesting experience. And for the company that I've joined, you know, we support e-commerce, we support merchants in e-commerce. So we're trying to help smaller businesses and larger businesses continue to be successful in that space of e-commerce and supporting their customers all online, which again, as Dr. Prager mentioned in the previous panel, is something we've seen a tremendous boom in already.
Any tips for getting a job using these virtual formats?
I think you really got to lean into the good Zoom backgrounds. No, I think, you know, as we're experiencing even right now, Frank, the reality is we're all probably surprised at how much we really can connect virtually, how much we really do feel comfortable having a conversation, and in some ways, leveling the playing field. You know, whether it's the CEO or the interviewee, you're both maybe sat in your living room and you're people, and there's something very humanizing about this whole experience, and I think we're all really coming together in a lot of positive ways despite everything else.
Let me bring in Sam Polk now, and as we heard in your video, Sam, you indicated your company was very well positioned to meet the challenges involving the coronavirus crisis. Tell us what type of pivoting you did at every table, if any, during this crisis, and where things stand at this point.
Yeah, so when we went into the crisis, we had three main businesses that we were growing. That was our restaurant business, our smart refrigerator business, and our subscription home delivery business. And so when the pandemic hit, the restaurant business and the smart refrigerator business, most of those smart refrigerators are in offices. Both of those businesses got smoked. And so, you know, we sort of scrambled for a little while and started to grow the subscription business. But then we realized through conversations with the city and many city council people that there was this huge need for healthy food to be delivered to people. And if you think about most of the food relief in the city and really everywhere, it was basically before the pandemic, you know, soup kitchens and food banks. And that made a lot of sense before, where it was bringing people to the food. But now in the midst of a pandemic, you didn't want to bring people together like that. So it was really, how do you get the food to the people? And every table, as the video talked about, you know, started with this really difficult problem, which is how do you make healthy food affordable and accessible at a fast food price? And so what we had done in order to do that is basically reinvented the entire restaurant model. And that meant, you know, direct relationships with farms, all the way to our fresh, central kitchen where we're producing, huge amounts of healthy, fresh meals, and then having the refrigerated vehicles to deliver those meals directly to our stores and to consumers' homes. And so because of that, when the city called us and said, hey, we need, thousands and millions of meals delivered all over the city, can you do that? We were really the only company that was set up in a way to sort of meet the need at the price point that could fit the government's budget, considering how big the need was. And so since then, we've gone into this like huge sort of institutional food service business, which has really taken up the bulk of our business since then. And it was just an explosion of demand for us where we had, like the video said, we were hiring 10 people a day. We were, licensing or leasing vehicles from all over the country and having them shipped out here so that we had enough. We were, hiring drivers left and right. We had partnerships with major restaurant companies like Mendocino Farms and Lemonade who, hadn't been able to open, and we were saying, we'll take all your people right now. And so it was great, it was good for our business, and it was good for the city because we were able to get, food out at actually, incredibly low prices.
Obviously, you have a hands-on business. Face-to-face interaction is very, very important. How are you conducting business these days? And are you doing a lot of virtual work, meetings and so forth, or are you still out there on the front line?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say both. So we've got sort of, you might call it like a corporate team, including marketing, and those folks, a lot of them are still working remotely, and we have sort of all staff meetings on Zoom. But we also have a 30,000 square foot central kitchen where, it's making food and delivering food every day. And so every day we're in there tasting food, talking to people, working on the entire system. So, we're kind of like a hybrid company trying to figure out how to make this whole, in-person and remote hybrid system work.
Yeah, so Ghost Kitchen basically, right? Is what we're calling it.
So the ghost kitchens are basically, big, venture-funded companies buy these big warehouses and then make all these tiny little kitchens, 250 square foot kitchens. Our kitchen, first of all, we're the ones who bought it, and then it's 30,000 square feet. And that's just the beginning. We think at the end of this in Los Angeles, we're going to have a kitchen that's 150,000 square feet. So it's that's a ghost kitchen, and ours is like the central kitchen for all of Los Angeles.
That's amazing. So how big do you think you're going to get? And might you go into an old Sears or J.C. Penney or something like that? Would it be a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, how big we think we're going to get in Los Angeles, we think we're going to have 300 plus restaurants, 10,000 plus smart fridges, 50,000 home delivery customers, and then hundreds of institutional services customers, whether they're universities or hospitals or governments or even corporations. Like we have a huge deal working with Amazon right now to be both their provider of a store, where we've built a store in one of their corporate campuses, but also using our logistics to do remote delivery, to do home delivery to all their remote workers. And so our sort of system really can, make this incredible healthy food and then deliver it to you at home, or to a smart fridge at your office, or to one of our restaurants out in the world. And we think that this is really going to become the infrastructure for fresh food around the city of Los Angeles, and then frankly around the entire country.
Where is your facility now, and are you actively looking at places like in strip malls or in malls where stores, big stores have closed to expand?
Yeah, no. So we have our kitchen is is south of downtown, and it's 30,000 square feet. And so, but when we look for restaurant space, it's actually because that's the whole thing about the model is because we have a single central kitchen. Instead of building a really expensive restaurant, so a usual restaurant costs $1 million to build because you got to build the kitchen, and it's 2,500 square feet of space and takes 10 people to run. But ours, are 700 square feet and cost less than $200,000 to build, and you can operate them with 2 people. And so when we're looking for retail space, of which we're looking everywhere right now, we're looking for 500 to 1,000 square feet. With great parking and great visibility and great density, But if anybody on this call has some, commercial real estate to lease that fits that, we would like to talk to them.
You'll get a lot of action with that comment. And Victor Parker, let me ask you, obviously it sounds like Sam Polk was well positioned indeed, but others in the restaurant business and other small businesses, very, very tough situation right now and struggling and looking to you for help, especially among the restaurant people. What are you hearing from restaurants in trouble out there, and how can you help?
So I think what's really happened in the restaurant industry, and where most of the folks have been able to at least get a lifeline, are those that have been able to convert over to some type of takeout model, or at least some type of delivery model, and now they can actually, if they can eat outside. So I think one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the smaller cities particularly are allowing some waivers in some of their permitting, so that actually those businesses can now dine outside in the parking lot area, so it's safe for their consumers, as well as making sure they're safe for their employees, setting up some type of drive-through scenario so they can organize and do a takeout type setup for them. And I think that's really what's going to continue to drive that lifeline to our restaurant industry, particularly here in the South Bay, because it's such a heavy industry market sector for the South Bay and for Southern California. We really have seen an uptick when you look at the types of businesses that are also leveraging technology, where historically they weren't using any of the apps and those types of things and the technology to actually place orders and kind of facilitate that whole process. So the easier it is for them to make that transition, and as they kind of guide and plan for that, we're seeing that help a lot of our businesses, particularly in the restaurant industry.
I've seen the reports. I mentioned it earlier that the Yelp survey indicating Los Angeles leading the number of business closures compared to the rest of the country, and obviously a very difficult situation right now with this pandemic continuing. Any predictions that the SBA has put out as far as how many businesses are not going to make it?
We haven't really looked at how many businesses haven't made it. What we've looked at is really the number of loans and businesses that have been processed, particularly as it relates to the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And fortunately for us, California is actually leading the nation in the number of loans and the loan dollar volume in both of those programs respectively. And what I'm finding is that for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, it's very likely that you're going to continue to see an uptick in those loans, because depending on where you are in the supply chain outside of the retail area, but even in light manufacturing, which we have a lot of in the South Bay area, where you are in that supply chain, you may not have had the same immediate impact that many of the other businesses had. So we're really looking to see an uptick as these businesses now are recognizing that they may have run out of the initial savings or some of the stopgaps that they had in the past, and now they're going to be able to apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan to again provide that lifeline.
All right, certainly South Bay is one of the economic engines, as we've been discussing here. And Dana, let me ask you, why did Route choose the South Bay area to set up shop here?
Yeah, so Route actually has its headquarters in Lehi, Utah, and has recently been building out its presence here in LA, because we have put ourselves on the map for having incredibly innovative talent and a wonderful technology talent pool, and they just happen to like to surf as well, maybe. So I think we've definitely seen this concept of Silicon Beach already growing, but there's also I think in this area, in this community, a lot of disruption, a lot of disruptors. Even if you look at the biggest, companies in the South Bay and in the economic report that we've now seen, there's robotics on there, there's green energy and sustainability and space exploration. I mean, that's something to be really proud of. So when you look at it that way, it seems to make a lot of sense why companies would want to come to this area to build something disruptive.
Sam, would you like to surf? Give us some of the reasons why you're here, please.
Well, I grew up in LA, and I do like to surf, but no, we're opening a store in Torrance, and we also have a store on campus on Cal State Dominguez Hills, and we're looking for more and more properties. So it's just a great market for us and a great part of the Los Angeles community.
Got some questions from the audience now, including this one. Where do you see every table transitioning to after COVID? Has this new approach been successful enough to keep going in the long run?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, for sure. So we've now fully built out an institutional services team that is focused on, meeting the needs of hospitals, of government and corporations. And so you'll see a lot more institutional food service from every table. But the other thing to mention is that we've launched a social equity franchise program, and that's going to be a huge deal in the coming years in Los Angeles. So basically, a lot of restaurants, franchise, and franchising is a great way to grow for restaurants. The problem is that, franchising is really limited to, entrepreneurs who have access to capital or have accumulated capital. And so what that leaves out is the incredibly talented entrepreneurs of color from underserved communities who may not have been able to accumulate a lot of capital. And so what we've done is we've gone to major foundations, the Annenberg Foundation, California Wellness Foundation, Dignity Health Foundation, and the Kellogg Foundation, and put together $3 million of loans, which they've given to us, that we can now loan to talented entrepreneurs of color from underserved communities who want to own their own Every Table franchise. And so we think that this program is a great way for us to expand around Los Angeles, but is also a tremendous way to sort of meet the need of economic redevelopment in this city and grow the number of Black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses all around the city, all while spreading access to healthy food all around the county of Los Angeles.
Victor, let me ask you, any special resources available for minorities, small businesses owned by people of color, women of color, and so forth?
Right. So what we've been doing is making sure that we're making a concerted effort to provide the additional technical assistance needed in a lot of communities where they normally would not have had access to those services. And so making sure that virtually we're able to provide that counseling and helping them to pivot, as well as looking at a lot of the different grant programs that some of the local cities are offering, and we're hoping will continue to offer. And so we're partnering with the county, with the cities, to provide the technical assistance piece of it as we kind of work together to make that public-private partnership, connecting the dots for minority and underserved communities so that they can, again, take that American dream and creating their business if they're starting a new one, but obviously keeping those businesses afloat that may be already existing in our communities.
All right, let me ask you this. Any thoughts about how the workforce should prepare, how people should prepare for this environment and the future?
Yeah, I think this is something we've been grappling with for a while now, and I touched on it earlier. When we think specifically around young people looking at careers and what does that mean for the future and what areas do we want to be spending our time, hopefully we see now more than ever that there are things out of our control that require us to change how we do what we do, and that we need to lean into that change. And the sooner that we do, the easier it will be for us to move through those moments. So like the wonderful story of Every Table and the things that can happen when, something like a pandemic comes along and allows you to change your whole business model. I'd say that we want to make sure people are thinking about, technology from a place of embracing it, and not from fear, in a place from how can I learn to work with the skill set I have and also enhance my skill set with these other pieces of technology, whether it be, artificial intelligence or augmenting ourselves in somehow through a knowledge base.
And Sam, any final thoughts here on how people should prepare for this economy and moving forward?
I just think that, in a time like this is the time to look out for the people who may need the most help in this time. And so, whatever you can do to, lend a helping hand. And I think a disproportionate amount of the pain and burden from this pandemic has fallen on, communities of color and marginalized communities. And so, there's a lot of us sort of looking out for ourselves, which is, of course, what we should be doing. But at the same time, I think this is something that we all need to get through together. And so just making sure to lend that hand, stick out that hand, and make sure that everybody's lifted up during this time.
From the SBA, again, you have a huge job, and we wish you all the best in your important work. Any final thoughts here, please?
No, and I think I just want to piggyback on what we were saying about looking at the workforce going forward. And I think, how we can better make sure that we're preparing, not only as our kids and our youth are transitioning into a hybrid environment, we need to also make sure that our workforce is able to do that as well, and making sure that, our employees have, internet access at home and have laptops at home, and those types of things that we can do to kind of enhance that customer service and customer experience workforce that we're going to need to have going forward. And as we transition into that, and communicating and working together closely with community colleges and with our city and local officials to help provide that type of service to really help bring the entire community up as we go through this pandemic and recovery process.
Bill Parker, Dana Finding, Sam Polk, panelists, thank you very, very much for this informative discussion, and we wish you all the best. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching today. I hope the forecast was informative and provided you with strategies that'll help your business develop the tools needed to survive and weather this pandemic storm. Just a reminder that today's South Bay Economic Forecast Report will be available later today on the Cal State Dominguez Hills website. And remember, as a thank you for attending today's program, every table, on behalf of CSU Dominguez Hills, thank you very much for joining us at this event today. Thank you. We wish you all the best. Please stay healthy, and hope to see you in person next year. Thank you.